In today's video, I wanted to share some of the benefits that I've noticed when I keep a daily meditation practice, as well as what I have noticed for me when I fall off the wagon, so to speak, and I stop meditating for weeks to months. I think I've even gone like over a year break without meditation at some point. There are many types of meditation, so I'm going to cover that in a separate video as far as different ones I've tried, because it's not always, it's not always the traditional sitting upward still with your eyes closed and having hand mudras and stuff like that. There are many different types, and I have noticed no matter which type I do, the type of meditation or the style is less important than the actual meditation practice, like consistency, than the consistency. So I have notes so that way I don't completely lose track. But some of the benefits that I notice when I meditate on a daily basis is that I have less stress, not only in frequency, but also intensity. Like the intensity of my stress is lower. And on top of that, when something stressful comes up, like maybe it's a trigger that comes up, I find that I deal with it better. I deal with it better, I handle it better. And if I do end up going into that same reactive pattern, whether it's immediately going into that same reactive pattern, or I try to do something different, and then the trigger's just been sitting there for too long, and then I get reactive anyway, I find that I'm able to notice it more, so it doesn't feel like as knee-jerk reaction kind of thing. And on top of that, I've noticed that there's less judgment to myself, less criticism. And when I have moments where the criticism or the self-judgment, because I reacted the same way I normally do to a trigger, if it feels the same to me on an experiential level, there's still some space between it so that I can open up and feel some compassion for myself more often. I find that for me, the harder thing to deal with is not the repeating of some old pattern, whether it's like, getting into a trauma response, or, judging, making assumptions or things like that, or trying to like control the situation. I find that is not the hardest thing for me to deal with, and it's not the most painful. It's the judgments that I have about myself that are more painful than what actually happened or what I actually did or didn't do. And I've noticed that, there's been space between that. So it makes it a lot easier to address and deal with those like self-judgments, which makes a huge difference for me. Less stress, I know that's a common one, but I also wanted to bring up less stress because I find one of the physical reasons for it for me is that science is starting to verify that having a meditation practice helps rebalance your autonomic nervous system, which is the part of your brain that handles a lot of the automatic stuff, the stuff that can go on autopilot. So like your heart rate, blood pressure, your breathing, digestion, things like that. I noticed that when I have a consistent meditation practice, a consistent one, which doesn't have to be every day for every person, but for me personally, I need it to be every day, but the point is consistency, not that it's daily. I noticed my heart rate started to go down because my heart rate was high before. My blood pressure started to normalize, and I was heading towards the pre-high blood pressure stage, that elevated high blood pressure, but isn't like diagnosed high blood pressure state. I had palpitations, I had a lot of headaches, I had no energy, and I found that I just had more energy throughout the day to go and do day-to-day things, including things I didn't think I could do. I never thought that I'd be able to run. Like that was not something that ever crossed my mind as something else capable of doing, especially given, my medical history, like with the health conditions that I had been dealing with. I will leave a card up if you are interested in checking that story out. But it 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 makes it easier for me to amaze myself on what I'm actually capable of doing when I got used to telling myself that I can't do this or I can't do that. I got to a point where when I was like in my break with meditation, I could not even go grocery shopping without like being really close to the like entranceway. I could only take but so many steps at a time before I started to get dizzy. My heart rate would go up and all that. So meditation helps with that part of the brain on a physical note. I found that also there was an improved like emotional resiliency. I touched on that a little bit with the stress, as far as like being able to deal with and handle stressful things better or more efficiently. I think I like that word more. And I think part of it is because I've noticed when I keep a consistent meditative practice, I notice there's more space between me and my thoughts. And when I notice more space between me and my thoughts, I don't identify as the thought. So I'll give you just an example. I am depressed is a thought. You see how easy it is? And the English language makes it especially easy to go and identify with thoughts, because it's very common to say, I am insert emotion. I am insert age. If you notice in other languages, you have them, like you have your age. You are not the age, you have it. They use have more often, where in English we use I am for a lot of things that aren't used the same way in other languages. But anyway, like I am depressed is a thought. But you see how easy it is to go and identify as a depressed person when you hear or you say I am depressed over and over again for a myriad of years. So like when there's space, it's not saying that the depression isn't there. Like we're not bypassing that, like feeling depressed is there. But if you're experiencing depression or you have depression, at least for me, that is a very different energy behind those versus I am depressed. There's such a rigidity in saying I am depressed or I am sad versus saying I am experiencing depression or I have like depressive symptoms, things like that. There's a different energy with that. So more space, which makes it easier to go and reword things if you feel that you need to reword them. More space between me and my emotions. So kind of like what I was talking about earlier, the emotion, even though it's going on within me, it's still separate from me. And I can't really explain it in a logical way, but there's an energetic difference between noticing that you're experiencing emotion and believing that you are the emotion. And if I believe that I am that emotion and it's like a really reactive one, such as depression, or I am anxious, that's the quickest way to go into a fight or flight response, at least for me. And then my brain is just like, oh, okay. Well, like, where's the threat? And there may not be a threat anywhere. So that space between my emotions, especially intense ones, are really helpful. I find that even if I do find myself caught in that emotion and I'm like still kind of in that space where I'm like, I can rationally know I'm experiencing anxiety, but subconsciously I'm still in this emotional, intense space of I'm anxious. Oh my gosh, I said I'm anxious. Oh my, and like compounding like that kind of uh anxiety upon anxiety, like that is the ultimate compound interest on anxiety. And it even when that is happening, I'm able to notice it more. Sometimes it's a little bit of space, sometimes it's a lot of space, but even if it's that little bit of space, that's it. It feels like for me that space just takes some of the weight or the burden of anxiety off, even while I'm in the anxious experience, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't feel as heavy. It can still feel heavy, but not as heavy. And not as heavy for me is just like, yay. So let's see, I talked about those. Um, I want to go back a bit to space between me and the thoughts again, because I did want to mention that I found that my connection to my subconscious mind strengthens when I am consistent with meditation. And so, what I mean by that for me is there are thoughts that I'm aware of. So I can react to something and I know, okay, yeah, that thought helped fuel me feeling this way, and that feeling helped fuel me responding or reacting in this way. Like an example, I could hear my cat whining, and my thought is, there's a problem. What's wrong? And then I feel anxious because I'm thinking, oh, there's a problem. What's wrong? And then when I feel anxious enough, then I start to feel all fidgety. Sometimes I'll feel irritable. Sometimes I'll go and like just drop what I'm doing and run to see what my cat's doing. And she's just like, she's fine. She's just doing whatever she's doing. Like there isn't an issue. That is an example of me being aware of the thought fueling the reaction of dropping everything that I'm doing or feeling irritable and going to see what's wrong with my cat, to find out there's nothing wrong with my cat. But there are some thoughts that are underground that you have like you could have a reaction or a pattern, and it's linked to a thought that is in the subconscious because it's buried, because you got all this other stuff, because your mind is so overwhelmed with all this stuff. There's really no space for the stuff in the subconscious to come up to the surface. So as I started to be more aware and bring in more space with the conscious mind, it allowed for the stuff that's already there, whether you want it or not. It's already there in the subconscious mind to come up to the surface so it can be addressed. And as that happens, it's not always pleasant. I'm not going to lie about that. But as it happens and I start to address those things, then I start to feel even lighter, because that's less stuff being like stuffed down in the subconscious like box, if you want to use an analogy. So some people access their subconscious mind through hypnosis, and I have done that before. Some people access their subconscious mind through journaling, where they just start writing, and then, oh, okay, that thought came up. Or they'll write down or think about a thought, and then another thought that was linked to that thought that was kind of buried, so it was kind of obscure and subtle, comes up. It's like, oh, and it's like a tree is what it feels like sometimes with thoughts. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been telling myself this for how many years? So I a stronger subconscious thing. And then sometimes if you have you can have a connection where you could just be working or doing something, and that bam, a thought pops up, kind of feels like a download to me. So that is mostly actually how I access my subconscious thoughts, is through that. But there are a myriad of ways to access your subconscious like stuff. But it got stronger with meditation, the connection. Let's see, is there anything else? Oh yeah, and the last benefit. I have noticed that my ability to parent and coach myself through stressful times, stressful experiences, and triggers, and like uncomfortable emotions and uncomfortable sensations, actually. Um, it is very possible, especially if you're used to being in a space of dissociation, like I spent like many years doing, that sensations in the physical body that are normal to people who don't experience chronic dissociation, um they're very uncomfortable and intense. So and as an example, like the physical feelings that you feel when you're excited, I'll get as an example, like I spent many years believing it wasn't okay to be excited. That was something that was discouraged growing up, was to be excited about things. So when I feel excited about something, and like a new game coming out, like I'll feel this like this tension from being excited, and like I'll have the biggest grin on my face, and I'll feel palpitations, and a part of me is freaking out because I'm not used to that physical sensation. So whether it is a physical sensation that you are not used to, like feeling excited, whether it is uh an emotion or a feeling that you're not comfortable with or used to sitting with for longer periods of time, whether it's any of those things, I have found that my ability to parent myself through it and coach myself through it. So sometimes I feel like I'm being more of a coach to myself, to get to, to sit through it and go through the experience. And then sometimes I feel like I'm being that parent to myself that, you know, um, I let me just say, my parents did the best that they could. I think every parent, regardless of their issues and limitations, they do the best that they can. And I do know that I was loved. That doesn't mean that they were perfect and that they met every single emotional need all of the time. I don't really think that's possible. But those ways that I felt like as a child, I wish I was parented, I can do that for myself easier and more often and with a little more grace than when I do a consistent practice. So that was the last benefit. And okay, there were two more. I'm sorry. um, it's easier to look at things as a glass half full instead of half empty. And I notice an increased like openness, like to an increased openness, an increased curiosity, and an increased sense of gratitude. Like it's so much easier to connect with gratitude for me. One of the things that has helped me tap into gratitude, especially if I've gone a long time feeling pretty disconnected from gratitude in general, because I'm like, I would be like angry at the world. One of the things that helped me actually was using a gratitude journal. It gave me that structure to be able to start to write a few things that I was grateful for and not feel pressured to have to write this huge essay that I felt like I had to do if I had just like a blank, unlined, open journal. And I found that really helpful to start to just get my foot in the door, um, to just ease into making gratitude a regular part of my day again. And I enjoyed that so much that I wanted to create a journal that would be helpful for other people as well. So I have a gratitude and joy journal. It's a daily journal. It is undated, so that way, like, if you skip a day, like I have before, I can come back and I don't have to waste, you know, uh, entries. I liked having a journal that was just focused on gratitude and joy, and that actually was the way that I was able to ease into journaling more consistently, was starting out with a journal that had, like, little prompts. And this journal has a prompt for gratitude, a prompt for joy, and then a couple other ones if you feel like you want to really go extra and do some additional reflection. But what I like about this journal is that it's simple and straight to the point, and it can help you quickly cultivate those energies of gratitude and joy. And so if that is something you're interested in, or you think someone would appreciate that as a holiday gift, or, like 2023 is around the corner, so New Year's resolution, or you're just feeling like, you know what, I really want to like dive into gratitude more, it's a wonderful option. I'll leave a link um to the journal so that way you can check it out. And yeah. So moving on to the things that I noticed when I stepped away, because I've had weeks and months that I've fallen out of meditation. And I've mentioned some of them already, but I will mention it again. My mood. Okay, so initially it would feel like, okay, I'm still doing okay. And then I would absolutely like crash because I wouldn't really notice the downtrend. So it would feel like this really intense whiplash kind of thing. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling extremely, intensely depressed, intensely anxious, more hopelessness, more ideation, like frequent, deep, intense ideation. My thoughts are like running 300 miles an hour. They don't stop. Like it just keeps on going. My physical body I start to have more of the chronic pain come back. Um, I think because I'm more anxious. Let's see. I end up falling back into like old patterns, like numbing patterns to try and feel better, whether it is food addiction, overeating, it's a big one. Eating a ton of processed foods. And I mean like a ton, not just a ton in terms of frequency, like it was an everyday thing, but in terms of, again, overeating, like the sheer amount. And I would make myself sick. Um, Hygiene care going down. I'm not doing things that I enjoy doing. I start stepping outside less often, I've noticed. And then a big one, which kind of wraps up all these other things I've noticed when I step away from meditation, is that I just experience more suffering that isn't even really necessary. I think suffering is really, as much as I don't like it, it is the very thing that led me into meditation. Like it can be a really powerful catalyst and guide to get you to do something different. At the same time, a lot of that for me was unnecessary, because had I just taken that chunk of time for myself and been consistent with it, I may not have suffered the same way that I did every single time I stopped. And then I also noticed that when I did need to return, like when I not need to, but when I chose to return to meditation, sometimes it took a while for the effects of meditation to rebuild back up for me to actually feel back to a steady or baseline. Sometimes it just takes a few practices to start to get there, but lately I've noticed like the last time it took at least 3 months of daily meditation for me to get back to that baseline. Because I look at meditation as like you're building compound interest for well-being. And for me, when I'm not consistent, that's building compound interest for not feeling so great. Not that you feel great all the time with meditation, but again, it helps me deal with things so much better and more effectively. So with that said, I will end this video. I hope you find it helpful. I would love to hear in the comments if you have meditated or you have a meditation practice, like what do you notice when you meditate consistently? It doesn't have to be every day like me, but consistently. And if not, or you're thinking about it, like I'd love to hear your thoughts about meditation, because I found there was a lot of stuff with meditation that I did not realize that I thought was the case. Like I thought it had to look a certain way or it had to be a certain way, and it didn't. So I'll see you guys in another video.